Hi, this is Miss Slitton. Say hi.
Hello.
And this is Chapter 12 review, cardiovascular system. So the first thing we want to do is be able to compare and contrast the three different vessels. So let's quickly do our little song together. Ready? Here we go. Put your A over your heart. Arteries go away from the heart. Veins go towards. Arteries, arterioles, capillaries in the middle, venules, veins. Heart, body, heart, lungs. Heart, systemic, heart, pulmonaries. Atria, collect, and ventricles, pump. Okay? The other thing we need to know when we talk about, since we're right here at this spot, is left and right. It's your left, your right. When you look at a document, when you look at a side of a heart or a document that has a picture of a heart, the left and the right, it's as if it's your patient's left or right. You want to be able to compare and contrast function, okay, with structure and function. So when we look at the artery, the capillary, and the vein, what are the differences amongst them, and how does that structurally, how does that help them serve their purpose? So we know arteries go what? Away. So they receive blood that's under tremendous pressure, yes? So they have to be able to withstand that without bursting, expand, and then snap back. When I feel that expansion and snap backage, that alternating expand, snap back, what am I feeling? Pulse. That's my pulse. What is that a measure of? My heart rate. Yeah, it's my heart rate. And is that systole or diastole that's causing that expansion? Systole. Of which of the four chambers of my heart, if I'm feeling my pulse out here? Yes, my left ventricle. My left ventricle is causing that because my left ventricle pumps blood to my systemic circuit, whereas my right ventricle pumps it to my pulmonary circuit, my lungs. All right? So that's why you see this thickened wall as compared here in a vein. Okay? In a vein, though, this lumen is much bigger, the opening, as compared to the artery. And that's because the blood's moving slowly through a vein. It doesn't have to be thick-walled. In fact, it's advantageous to be thin-walled. Why? Because you can wet it, compress it. Okay? The benefit of compressing a vein is that's how you keep blood moving through that vein. By compressing the vein, and because they have what? Valves. Valves make sure that the blood flows in one singular direction. And that singular direction, what do all veins make the blood move towards? The heart. Okay, I know that's not anatomically correct. They make the blood move towards the heart. Arteries go away from the heart, veins go towards. What makes the blood go towards are the valves. What gets the blood moving, because sometimes it's against gravity, is the compression on those veins, forcing the blood to move. Capillaries are only how thick? One cell. Yeah, one cell thick, and this allows for exchange of oxygen and nutrients and CO2 and waste, and it facilitates that. Good. All right, so after we learned the anatomy of those structures and we understand what happens here at the capillaries, let's kind of pre-talk over something that comes at the end. We talked about blood pressure, right? And the blood pressure is going to be surging closer you are to your what? Heart, right? The farther you get away from your heart, then the lower the pressure is going to be. Because blood's always going to move from a higher pressure to the lowest pressure. So for instance, the aorta would be when it's under the highest pressure, and the vena cavas, it would be at the lowest pressure, going from high to low. In the window, I don't know. Okay, that's important. So here, my blood pressure is highest, and then my blood pressure decreases as I go through that capillary. Now there's a corresponding pressure, because this blood pressure says out, because once the blood moves out of an arterial into a capillary and it's one cell thick, things can start oozing out, right? of these capillaries and the spaces in between them. So that's going to force fluid out. What's going to draw fluid back into these capillaries?
It's hypertonic.
Yeah, it's hypertonic in there, and that's referring to something. Osmotic pressure, which is fairly continuous throughout the capillary bed. So at this end, at the arterial end, the blood pressure, the hydrostatic pressure is greater. By the time you get to the venual end, the osmotic pressure is greater, so fluid is recovered, right? And that makes a nice little current through the capillary bed to make sure oxygen and nutrients are out, in this case in a systemic circuit, and CO2 and waste are in. All right, then we went on to the chambers of the heart and the 4 chambers of the heart. And let's see if we can just remember by attacking this diagram, shall we? Okay, so I'll point, let's make the blood start at the vena cava. You tell me the name of the structure that we're going through in our pathway we're going to take, all right? So I'm going to be deoxygenated, which we know blood is not blue, but it's just easier because our preconceived notions. So what would this be called? Superior, and this would be the inferior vena cava, right? Another name for that is anterior and posterior. See how this is at the front and this one's at the back, okay? It then moves in here. What's this? Right atrium. We're moving through here. What's this? Good. We're here. Where are we? That, what is that? Right ventricle. We're here. What's that? Semilunar valve. Good. And then we're going up and out. What is this over here? Pulmonary arteries go away from the heart and towards the lungs. So if I was going to number, I'd say 7 LU, and then I'd go NGS. You okay with that? And then I come back here. What are these? Pulmonary veins. I'm here. And I'm here. Good. How do we remember this? Rat, lab, or lab, rat, right? Spell lab or spell rat. A mitral valve is another name for the bicuspid. Okay? 9, 10, I'm now here. Where am I? And now I'm going through, I'm what ventricle? Left ventricle, good. I'm here, I'm the semilunar valves. I'm up out here, I'm aorta. Then 14 would be the what? Body. And then back to my ones. Are you good with all that? Let's label a few other things. What is this? Septum. Good. That's the septum. Now, the pacemaker of the heart, what is that called? SA node. Yeah, so your SA node is up here, over here. SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. It sends a wave of depolarization across the atria, and then it hits the, what's the next node? AV node. And that AV node sends a wave of depolarization across the ventricles, so it goes atria, ventricles, relax. Atria, ventricles, relax. Are you good with that? Okay. Next. We talked about blood pressure, and that's your systolic pressure over your diastolic pressure, and that'd be like 120 over 70. The 120 is the greatest force on the blood due to the heart. Diastolic is when it's kind of cruising in between surging. Okay, and then we talked about heart sounds. Heart sounds. So it was love dub, love dub, love dub, love dub. Those largest of sounds, in this case your S2 or S1, S2 sounds. When you hear the large sounds, those are the only ones I want you to know. What are those? Valve doors shutting. Okay. Which set of doors shuts first? AV valves, and then your semilunar. So the atria contract, sending blood into the ventricles. Okay, those are one-way valves going through the tri and the bicuspid valves, right? Blood's going through it. When the ventricles contract, it sends blood up. And up and out the pulmonary arteries and the aorta, but up and against the AV valves, which slam them shut. When the ventricles relax, blood wants to come back down into the ventricles, but that is prevented by the what valve? Semilunars. So it's AV semilunar, lub dub. AV semilunar, AV semilunar. And if it sounds weird, then you're probably having a what? Heart murmur. Good job. Okay, next, we talked about who controls your heartbeat ultimately? Brain. And what is it called? Medulla oblongata. And it sends a signal, like we said, to the SA node, which then sends it to the AV node. Yes? We already talked about that. We said we could measure that. What does the P wave measure? Systole. What does QRS measure? Ventricle systole and atria diastole. And then what does T measure? Ventricular diastole. Okay. Why is QRS the biggest? Yeah, you're pumping blood to your systemic circuit and to your lungs. That's a big pump. When atria contracts, it's not like they have to send that blood very far. It's like, and you're there. Okay. All you have to do is get to the ventricles. All right. Next, we compared and contrasted the pulmonary and the systemic circuit. Pulmonary circuit is going to start right here with your left, I'm sorry, not pulmonary, systemic circuit. And you're like, no, Miss Litton. Systemic circuit is going to start here with your left ventricle, and the pulmonary circuit is going to start here with deoxygenated blood. That's what you start out with, right? We talked about a specialized circuit around the heart. This is a subset of your systemic circuit. Subset of systemic is to send blood to your heart, and the key word for the heart is coronary. We talked about this really cool thing where blood has a double set of capillaries, because all the blood that leaves your small intestines, it has to be checked to see the nutrient level. So instead of going right back to the lungs, we shunt it via the hepatic portal vein to the liver. And there, if it comes in hot with nutrients, some is removed. If it comes in low with nutrients, then it's put in. So it always leaves the liver just slightly elevated. And if the liver runs out, we get it from our fat. Okay? So that's called hepatic. Yeah, muscle. There we go. Hepatic portal vein. This diagram reminds us that where the surface area is the greatest in our circulatory system, where we have the most vessels, is at the capillaries. And the blood moves the slowest there. And that's good because all what takes place there? Exchange. Capillaries red blood cells move through single file through capillaries, and that facilitates that exchange. Okay, we talked about this, right? About hydrostatic pressure versus osmotic pressure. At the arterial end, fluid is forced out due to hydrostatic pressure being greater than osmotic pressure. At the venular end, that osmotic pressure allows us to recover the CO2 and waste. We have already talked about how veins are compressed by muscles. If the valves don't work, I won't show you the other. Varicose veins, okay, there it is. All right, now, we then said, okay, let's talk about what's in blood. So if we did use the little centrifuge, we would have red blood cells. What's the job of red blood cells? Carry oxygen. What's the blood of white blood cells? What's the job, I mean? Yeah, protect, fight, good. What's the job of platelets? Clot. Okay. Plasma is mostly what? Water. Helps with our blood volume, but things are dissolved in that plasma. Let's go through the list of what's dissolved in that plasma, and we think what? Road trip. So we have to stop for gases, go in and get some nutrients, maybe be healthy and get some protein, but you know we want some salt, and we might as well try and go nitrogenous waste, hormones, vitamins. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, so those are all the things that we would find in plasma. We've already talked about red blood cells, white blood cells. Now, clotting. Clotting is a series of multiple clotting factors, of which I'm not having you memorize all of them. All I want you to know that there's platelets and it ultimately ends in fibrin. But it's like this triggers this, triggers this, triggers this, triggers this. That's what you need to know in order to get a blood clot. I don't expect you to memorize prothrombin, thrombin, fibrinogen, fibrin. I don't expect you to memorize that. Just focus on the fibrin threads and focus on the platelets. And those fibrin threads do trap red blood cells. Last but not least, we said let's not do these things. Let's not have high blood pressure. What's the technical word for high blood pressure? Hypertension. Hypertension can lead to getting a stroke where a portion of your brain dies. Why could a portion of your brain die? Look at Perry. What? You could have a clot, or you could have a aneurysm, which is a ballooning of a blood vessel that bursts, right? So why might we have high blood pressure? Well, maybe our blood vessels are clogged, and that's called what? Atherosclerosis, and it's harder for the blood to move through those vessels because they're smaller in diameter, so our heart has to work harder. That can increase it. That high blood pressure, when it comes in fast and furious into our organs out there in our systemic circuit, that can cause damage to those, and that can cause aneurysms. It can cause renal failure to have that high blood pressure. We already mentioned a stroke. A stroke is when the brain dies. We just know it's related to the circulatory system, either due to high blood pressure or a clot. Okay? Heart attack, you have a cramp in your heart. Usually a blood vessel, a coronary vessel is blocked, and as a result it doesn't get oxygen, it has a cramp. Aneurysm is a ballooning of a blood vessel. And that was it. You ready to take a practice quiz? Okay. So do a great job, study, get some sleep, and have a piece of toast. All right, tell them goodbye.
Bye.
Okay.